Welcome to the final online lecture from our fashion writing course. I hope that you have learned a few different styles, techniques, things about yourself during the course of the semester, these 14 or so weeks. And just hope that on some level you've improved either your critical thinking skills, your writing skills, being more aware of the things that you do as far as mistakes so that you can now catch them and be even better going forward. And overall, maybe discovered a niche of writing that you do enjoy, you like spending time doing, and maybe time just slips away because you're so engrossed in it, or not. Maybe you've decided that writing really isn't your favorite thing, but it's a skill that, regardless of what you do or where you go, still is going to be with you. So I hope in some sense you've improved upon your writing yourself, expanded your thoughts about consumer behavior, fashion, trends, reviews, critiques, all these ways of looking at things and understanding a formula and a format for them, and can then go on your own and continue your blogs, find your own voice, pitch articles, have a wonderful career in writing or not. But at least I hope that you have found yourself in a much better place than when you started. So today I just wanted to go over a few things that we didn't do in class so far. And so they relate to thinking about business communications and ways of writing in that sense, with a little bit of the marketing and advertising aspects. And then ultimately, I think the best way to lead is by example at times, to talk a little bit about, if you were to be a writer, what kind of things you could do career-wise to boost that. And so, without much ado, let's get started. So we started actually at the end of the class talking a bit about claims, disclosure, ethics when it comes to writing. And so I mentioned that with journalists, you have to disclose, there are certain rules and regulations as to accepting gifts and disclosing certain business associations and ties. So bloggers, you also have to abide by the FTC disclosure, which means you have to disclose if you've been paid or received an item as a gift. But also within your message that you write, be it editorial or from more of a marketing business point of view, if you're making other sort of claims that may come into some sort of ethical standing point, you have to make sure that if you state facts, they are indeed true and that they can be backed up. There's been scientific research proven or some sort of research done. So for example, you guys had an assignment in which you wrote about like an acne product, and some students said things like, this product will improve your self-esteem, or it will prevent bullying or make you feel better. These kind of things aren't necessarily a proven claim. So with advertising, it can be implied via an image, a video, something like that, but to actually state that as an end result of a product isn't necessarily something that you can do without repercussions. So a few other examples that come to mind when thinking about this is, one is if you ever write about something that has some sort of nutrient benefit for sure. So, acne medicine is supposed to have a very clear, pun intended, result. But things like vitamins, you have to be very, very careful if you're talking about what they do. So, for example, if you're writing about a multivitamin, and you want to say something like, this boosts your immune system by 100%, or this will definitely make your nails grow 6 inches, or it'll make your nails 10 times stronger. This stuff is very, very iffy. You have to make sure that if you're creating the brand messaging, that it's come from the lab, the factory, wherever that this information has actually been proven and pulled together. And if not, you can't really make that sort of claim. Another thing that happened in the beauty industry, in which I was privy to because a friend of mine was working on it, was the Nice and Easy Clairol campaign with Christina Hendricks, in which there was some debate that the color that was on her hair wasn't exactly the color that came out of the bottle or the box that you sold. And so, again, this is something that calls into question the trust and authority of a brand if they make a claim and indeed it's clearly not true, and so with brand messaging, things have happened with advertising having to be pulled because of Photoshop effects, or making claims that are quite outlandish. And so you see this a lot in a lot of beauty, anti-aging kind of ads. So just be wary in your own writing that you've done everything to protect yourself and back yourself up by making sure that you use a valid source, either from in-house or out-of-house PR, to pull together, any kind of claim that you use about a particular product. And so, also with that being said, thinking about the messaging itself, if you are veering towards talking about something positively or negatively, you have to remember that you don't have tone and inflection when it comes to writing. And so, depending on the context, especially if you're sending out a business communication or marketing message, be it a press release, an email, you have to remember that you have to use more sophisticated language and a little bit more formally as well to make sure that you set the right tone, and that if you are trying to be sarcastic, that it actually comes across as such, that it's not taken that you are for serious what you mean. And so in professional business communications, you're not going to use things like emoticons or a ton of exclamation points or anything like that. So you really have to rely heavily on your language to convey that. And so it can be tricky. If you're writing for your own blog, that's another thing. You can use emoticons if you want and make it part of your thing. But if you want, to get into more of a writing mode of challenging yourself to write more professionally, think of ways in which you can enhance the language that would contribute to this, but wouldn't be, taken the wrong way or misconstrued. And so with formatting any sort of business communication, be it an email, press release, what have you, you definitely have to remember to have an opening, a body, and a closing. And so depending on what document you're writing that's a marketing or business communication, would pertain maybe a little bit more to that. But just to start as an example, whenever I'm writing, writing related email to request something or respond to a publicist or company, what I generally seem to do that works for me, and I also sometimes do this in writing when I start to get a bit of a writing block, is that I will just kind of delve right in and write the body. So I won't really write the opening or the closing yet, especially the opening. And so I'll write the most meaty, important part of it first. And then I won't put, if it's an email, the person's email address in it yet, because sometimes you accidentally hit send and you're like, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that, I didn't realize. So just to avoid that scenario without having completed it. So I will jot down, sometimes in outline form, sometimes completely already written out, the most important things I need to convey in that message. And then I'll circumvent, edit that, and then go back in and add the opening. Dear so-and-so, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm just reaching out today to confirm blah, 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 blah. And then in closing, you may want to sum up and give some sort of time deadline. So I hope to hear from you by the end of the day today. Other than that, I'm out of the office for the next few days. Have a great Thanksgiving. Warmly, Julia. So for me, I just don't get caught up or stumped by the opening or the closing, because it's usually more cordial and rather straightforward and get right to the body of it. And so that is a good professional format for an email. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about the press release aspect of it because as we were talking about, there are some public relations marketing classes that you can take at school. But just in case you haven't, or just to have kind of my perspective on press releases from the editorial side, I thought that we could quickly kind of touch on that as well. So this goes back a little bit to the Writing for Public Relations chapter, but it is part of an important business communication, especially in the realm of fashion. So I want to talk to you a little bit about a press release. A press release generally will arrive to you in the form of an email, or it'll be handed to you at an event or on a thumb drive at an event, or sent to you with a bunch of products. And so if it's received via an email, there probably will be some sort of summary of it on the very first page of the email, which, by the way, when you do send an email in this kind of capacity, if you're sending it out to multiple people at once, which isn't ideal, but it happens, be sure to BCC, carbon copy everyone instead of having all their emails listed out. When that happens, it's very unprofessional and it annoys everyone. So avoid that at all costs. But the messaging that you would have in summary of the press release would all kind of fit onto one page, one screen. So there really wouldn't be any or very much scrolling involved. Most likely when it comes in this format too, there'll either be a PDF to a lookbook attached or a link to a digital lookbook that can be downloaded itself, or high-res images from it can be downloaded. So the format for a press release usually starts with the press release, the name of the company, who the press contact is in the top with their information, or sometimes that information appears at the very bottom. And so most press releases in their standard formatting are only kept to one page. This is very important because, especially in such a fast-paced world that we live in, you don't want to get wrapped up in having too much information coming at you, because then you won't even look at any of it. Think of the emails that you've gotten that have been really lengthy, and you just kind of don't want to deal with them and leave them for later. So it's the same kind of situation, and publicists are aware of this, so they want to just use enough information to catch your attention, as well as to give you enough of what you need. And so what you need, the most important information is the who, what, where, when, why, and all this would appear in the very beginning of the press release. So ideally, the first third of the page. So there may be a quote from the president of a company or store manager or creative director or something like that about what they're most excited for that season, or inspiration, something of that nature. And then from there, it'll go into the very specifics of the collection. So why are you bothering me? Why are you contacting me? Why are you sending me this? Oh, because we have a new line of vegan nail polishes, and it comes in 20 colors. The colors are called blah, 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 blah. This is the price range. This is where it'll be available. This is how long it'll be available. It's, and then have a breakdown probably of online and stores where it can be found. And then it'll have at the bottom, usually there's like an about, let's say the brand is Essie, so it'll be about Essie, and it'll be like, Essie was founded by Essie Weingarten in 1980. It's grown to be a billion-dollar company worldwide, blah, blah, blah. So a bit of a background, a bio on the company in a few sentences. It'll probably tell you if it's a public or private company. But just enough, if someone would say, oh, what's Essie, that you would know. And then all traditional press releases end with 3 hashtags at the very bottom. And this is just in, editorial and publicist speak, an indicator that the press release has ended, that there's no more information to come after that. And when you do release a press release, it should have the date on it at the very top, either the current date or the date of which you can relay the information. So it most likely will say something for immediate release, which means you can write about it right away, or it might say embargoed, which means that you have to hold off on publishing anything or saying anything about it until a certain date. And so it's very important to pay attention to these cues, because if you print something or put something online that doesn't abide by this, you will be asked to take it down. There may be some further implications, but at the very least, you'll have to take it down. So it's important to pay attention to these things. But that's pretty much the gist of the press release. It has a very straightforward format, again, no more than a page. And should have all the information that you need as far as the products involved, dates, ranges of sizes, what have you. So another form of business communications that you may need to have if you work as a blogger, or if you work in the realm of media relations, PR marketing, is that you may need to put together a proposal for a particular campaign or to acquire new business, or a media kit for a client or for yourself that includes all the information that you would want to share, or people would want to ask you about yourself or your brand that you represent or work for. And so depending on the company, the formatting for this can shift, but generally it's either a PDF document of some kind that probably originally was generated from something that similar to a PowerPoint. And so each page of it will have a different aspect of information that is important to include. So it'll have background information, probably a short biography of your blog or your company over time. It'll have a list of some of the accomplishments, and then it'll have some stats. And so the stats, if you're making a proposal for new business, will probably be alongside those rates. So for example, if I am a blogger and I'm packaging together, and it's called a deck. So if I'm putting together in my media deck information about my social media, and I want to say, like, you can choose from a social media campaign. Let's say, I'm saying, okay, you can do option A, which is $500, and it'll include, 10 social media posts across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then next to each of those, social media channels, outlets, I would list, how many followers I have. So I'd say, like, Instagram is a reach of 10,000 followers. Twitter is a reach of 12,000 followers, etc. So that they know, they have an exact idea of the deliverables and kind of what the audience reach is. And so that's really what people want to know. They want to know, who you are, what your credibility is, and what you'll do for them. And so it's really important to say those things as succinctly as possible. Using consistent branding and visuals as well definitely helps. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. And so, I've seen some that have been amazing and some that have been not so professional. And it really, if you are asking someone for money or for new business, and the thing that you present to them kind of looks crappy, what would be your rationale for working with them? Because you would just assume that they would produce crappy work for you too. So it's really important to have a really crystal clear, succinct message that you put across in this kind of capacity. Don't forget to include visual elements that might be more traditional, maybe a little bit boring, but maybe you can use some color to spice them up. So for example, using a graph or a chart can definitely be an option to show, maybe what the best advantage of your blog is, kind of its unique positioning for your blog, your brand, whatever you're representing. So don't forget to use any sort of table or anything like that may clearly lay the information out, make it easy to read, easy to, dissect and break apart. So in the chapter in the book, I think the most important thing to kind of come out of this chapter really is the methodology behind persuasive messaging. Because if you end up in the advertising, PR, marketing, sales side of things, in any creative capacity, it's kind of expected that you understand these things and can convey them, the methodology of it, And I think that the book does a really nice job of explaining that. And so just to kind of break down that a little bit further, all the things that I kind of just talked about, supporting your message with facts, making use of testimonials, stats, research, and guarantees is very important. Naming your sources correctly, being an expert, establishing that, as well as common ground with your audience, your client, is very important. Be enthusiastic, passionate for the subject. If you're not into it, it'll come across, trust me, as I can tell with some of your papers. Be objective, so be open to different viewpoints and suggestions. Be sincere and trustworthy. And overall, going hand in hand kind of with establishing your credibility and enthusiasm, have clear, good intentions that you're looking out, for your audience, for your client, for your brand, and make it feel like, hopefully it is genuine, and let it be known that you do care to those clients. And so, that these are the cues. They're basically cueing into basic human responses, human needs that are tapped into from a marketing standpoint. And so it's important to think about yourself as a consumer and what leads to trust or distrust by a certain brand, a certain magazine, a company, what have you. Because really, a lot of the things that you need to do as far as writing, you already know. All you really have to do is take pause and turn into yourself and think about them just for a second, because you've been doing it all along a million times a day. Whenever you see advertising or read something, read a bit of copy on an ad on the subway, you're analyzing it, you're internalizing it, you're kind of running through this checklist in your head. But to ensure that you actually do it and make it part of your protocol, it's good for us to talk about it and break it down. So the ADA model that is talked about in the book is really great. That works with persuasive messaging, goes along with your homework assignment of, kind of looking at, for the discussion board rather, the different kinds of comments that people post about products, and kind of running through those things in your mind that I just mentioned, but also in creating your own persuasive message, your own critique, to internalize these and check them off that you're doing them. And so the ADA method is getting the attention of your reader, creating interest in the message, forming desire by the reader, and stimulating the reader to action. And so any good persuasive message will hit all these checkpoints. And so you may already be naturally doing that if you have an assignment that's geared toward PR, marketing, any sort of persuasive or promotional messaging. But I think if you don't feel you have a natural tack for it, that it's good to pause and think about this and break it down in that sense of looking at these ADA checkpoints. So for me this week, for the discussion board, I was looking at some products that I actually was considering buying. And sometimes you have to take reviews that people say with a grain of salt, because you never know what their background is, what perspective they're coming from, if they're being subjective or objective, if you can trust them, right? So these are all the things you think about, especially whenever I read like a Yelp restaurant review or a hotel review. I'm thinking, like, why is this person even bringing up something about like the fork? Like, do I even care about that? Why do I care what kind of flatware they use at this restaurant, as long as the food's good? So just the things that I just mentioned in persuasive messaging are the exact same kind of things that you run through in your head whenever you read one. And so it's good to kind of get in the mentality of breaking down those messages.